How's it going?
Hey, did something come in the mail today?
Oh.
These nuts. Got him!
That's hella funny.
At the time of print, we're rapidly approaching the end of August, which means we're edging past 2/3 of the entire release schedule of 2021. So before we commence our descent into the cinematic, open world, procedurally generated, focus-tested hellhole that is the Christmas release period, developer Grasshopper Manufacture have offered players a welcome detour back to the Garden of Insanity. That's right, we're heading back to Santa Destroy once more in No More Heroes 3 for Nintendo Switch. Before we jump right into the meat of the story, it's important to understand the significance of the last 2 years, as No More Heroes 3 marks the second title with Suda51 in the director's seat for over a decade, rather than consigning himself to the role of consultant or producer. 2019's Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes not only signified Suda's return to the driver's seat, but serves a narrative that largely ties into the subject of this review, No More Heroes 3. While the idea of playing the game preceding its continuation seems like a no-brainer, I looked back on the reception of Travis Strikes Again and noted a lot of confusion and derision with its overall reception. Now, I'm not going to mince words here, but your enjoyment of No More Heroes 3 is contingent on your overall understanding and experience with Travis Strikes Again. We'll touch more on this notion later, but for now, let's recap the story so far. In No More Heroes 3, Otaku assassin Travis Touchdown returns to Santa Destroy after a protracted sea change, 9 years after the events of No More Heroes 2. During his absence, the corporation Utopenia, led by CEO Damon Riccatello, further gentrifies Santa Destroy and its neighbouring regions in a plan to create a resort community bearing a frightening resemblance to Disney's Epcot. As the expansion proceeds, an alien invasion occurs led by Fu, an extraterrestrial that was initially saved by Damon 20 years ago when he was a child. From here, Fu enlists the assistance of the United Assassins Association to create the Galactic Superhero Rankings, and challenge Earth's mightiest combatants to fight him and his 9 friends for world supremacy. With that, Travis quickly springs into action with Beam Katana in hand to save the planet and be crowned number 1. Now, that exposition might seem like a bit of a mouthful, but this is mainly due to the rapid change within and around Santa Destroy from its transition from backwater town to bustling hub ever since its introduction in the first No More Heroes game. A lot of these changes are reflected in its visual design that's become more boisterous and confident. Characters have a lot more detail to them, and their general aesthetic is less reliant on cel shading and hard shadows, synonymous with a good amount of Suda's previous work. Though the amount of sheen and shimmer observable in each character model feels suspiciously like a throwback to the very first trailer reveal of No More Heroes, which at the time was tentatively titled Project Heroes. Though the bizarre designs of each alien occupying the Galactic Superhero Rankings take center stage throughout the course of the entire game, reaping many advantages of crazy rendering techniques made possible on Unreal Engine 4. The environments mostly follow suit, but there are a few issues with polish and performance, particularly during open world exploration. During time spent in the overworld, there's the occasional amount of model pop-in, texture warping, and object collision in conjunction with a frame rate that fluctuates depending on how built up the location is. There are a few solutions to these issues, like redrawing between low and high res models, depending on the distance between them and how the game's programmed, though a lot of these problems may be due to the ever-aging Switch hardware, which has increasingly become a pain point for third-party developers that might not have the internal know-how or budget that a company like Nintendo has to get the most out of the console from a technical perspective. With that said, the visual design is still quite strong in all other fields and manages to perform pretty well during combat, which renders at a decent frame rate and resolution respectively. If you've played the first No More Heroes before, you're well and truly prepared for an open world experience that's not considered optimal by today's standards, but poking a bit of fun at needlessly inflated side content has always been the series' hallmark. Other important elements of presentation like UI design and sound are lovingly crafted to a standard you would expect from the wickedly talented team at Grasshopper Manufacture. Not a centimeter of space is wasted as gauges, maps, and information is conveyed in such clever and unique ways, never shying away from the opportunity to conjure convincing mock-ups of computer operating systems, heads-up displays for bipedal mecha, and plenty more. To put this in the nicest way possible, the overall aesthetic seems to aim for the most out there MySpace or GeoCities hosted page ever conceived, and No More Heroes doesn't just meet that standard, it obliterates it without compromising on utility or vision. The audio is also another fantastic asset of the game. The soundtrack is a brilliantly balanced blend of hip-hop, electro, and funk rock that goes together, as well as Travis and Red Leather Jackets. Jun Fukuda and Nobuaki Kaneko fill out a good majority of the track list, peppered with a few guest pieces that fully embodies the punk spirit of No More Heroes. Voice acting is solid across the board, with the highlights being Robin Atkin Downes, who manages to bridge a pretty good gap between hot-blooded arrogance and increasingly mature introspection with Travis Touchdown, while Nashir Dalal yields a stellar performance as the lovable, homicidal alien bastard Fu. Considering that he's the main antagonist, you'd hope that would be the case, but there are no doubts you'll be having as much fun listening to the game as you will playing it.
I see. Dead, huh? That's kind of funny.
Speaking of, No More Heroes 3 forgoes a lot of conventions found in the gameplay structure of No More Heroes 2, and instead opts for an approach that's reflective of the original title. During the game, Travis must source funds from a variety of methods and pay fees to commence any upcoming ranked fights. This is achieved through fighting waves of enemies, mowing lawns, unclogging toilets, picking up trash, and giving alligators the occasional brainbuster. Once enough money accumulates, you head off to the nearest ATM and you enjoy the impending bloodshed through a series of unique boss fights. While the original title used the monotony of everyday life as a palate cleanser to offset the hedonistic hyperviolence, it's played pretty straight here in No More Heroes 3. Each side job is spread out quite evenly throughout the game's world, and instead of making them deliberately dull, they feel slightly better to grind for money and enjoy this time around. Combat is where I feel this game shines its brightest, where defense missions and boss battles reward careful positioning and reactive timing to unleash a series of deadly beam katana swings and wrestling moves. The way fighting feels seems to have taken a lot of influence from Travis Strikes Again, all the way down to the control scheme of a heavy attack, quick attack, jump, and dodge, all mapped to the face buttons. With the absence of melee attacks that would stun enemies and allow you to perform wrestling moves, standard beam katana attacks now afflict stun, as well as being able to throw straight after a well-timed perfect dodge, or as it was called previously, a dark step. Every now and then your battery within your beam katana will dry out, and you need to use a certain motion in order to recharge it again. Though I was most particularly fond of the fact that the beam katana battery fully replenishes after a successful wrestling hold, so clever strategizing and timing can help you go through entire battles without ever having to manually charge a weapon. To help mix things up, the Death Glove makes a return from TSA as Travis is able to utilize a greatest hits selection of skill chips, which helps balance the difficulty of the game somewhat. Enemies in No More Heroes 3 hit harder and are more varied in their design compared to previous games, and have the potential to wipe you out in seconds if you're playing on the harder difficulties. Despite that, combat runs at a consistent frame rate, and it's a fair challenge too. The game is tough, but it's also fair, so if you're expecting something unfortunate and poorly designed like the final boss of No More Heroes 2, you don't have to worry about a thing. Thankfully, the bosses are all quite memorable and unique in their implementation, acting as vessels for genre deconstruction, and setting the stage for some good old-fashioned close quarters combat. The last thing I want to do here is spoil things majorly, as the ranked fights are the meat and potatoes of No More Heroes, so I'll just say they're worth their weight in gold. An addendum, I'd heartily recommend playing the game in Joy-Con mode if you can. The controls are pretty tight and responsive, and cutting through goons with motion controls is as timeless and cathartic as it was when playing the first No More Heroes on the Wii over a decade ago. While Grasshopper Manufacture spared no expense fine-tuning the fundamentals of what drives so many players to No More Heroes, there does seem to be a few corners cut in other areas. Most notably, the aforementioned performance of the open world sections leaves a lot to be desired. If you're a fan of the original game, this might not surprise or bother you as much as somebody dipping their toes in for the first time, but as a fan of the game's varied regions to explore, there are large portions of the world map that are completely inaccessible to the player. Not to say they're completely blanked out, as they look to show pretty comprehensive detail of winding streets and alleys, but they're omitted without much explanation as to why they weren't included. This is a bit of a shame, as I find Utopialand such a tragic yet strangely intriguing monument in the context of the story, and was looking forward to exploring every nook and cranny I could fit into. On top of that, the only beam katana available to use is the Bloodberry, while all the Tsubaki models are strangely absent, and the total skill chips that can be used by the Death Glove amounts to only 4 compared to the many skills that could be equipped within Travis Strikes Again. It feels like a step back in regards to letting the player have freedom over their loadout, which is a shame because the combat mechanics are the best they've ever been, so having some additional options to play around with would have been stellar. If I were to make a very uneducated guess, these issues could be chalked up to budget constraints or deadlines that weren't met in time, especially considering how hard COVID has hit the gaming industry. But if there's any additional patches or DLC that resolve some of these quirks, I'm completely on board. Regardless, the critical path will last you up to 15 hours, and before we get chewed out in the comments section of this video for not mentioning it, yes, there is a New Game Plus mode, and it allows you to carry your current progress over to a brand new run on harder difficulties. The positive side of this is that the game exudes enough style, charm, and intrigue to overcome these problems, under the condition that you're a fan of Suda's extended universe, dubbed Kill the Past, which involves a compilation of Suda51 directed games that No More Heroes is a part of. Playing No More Heroes 1 and 2 are a given, but above all, a thorough understanding of Travis Strikes Again is absolutely critical. Not only does it help establish characters' motivations and themes that both games share, but there might be a few references or running gags from other Grasshopper games that you might miss out on. For example,
Huh? Gene? Have you always sounded like that?
Something wrong?
No, it's just I always assumed you were a female.
Are you tweaking? This is how I've always sounded.
That's pretty badass.
if you find yourself a person that's pretty predisposed to jumping into long-running franchises at random points, I'd advise against it just this once for No More Heroes 3. Aside from the accessible beam katana action, you might end up a little bit lost on the narrative's significance and setup if you go in dry. But if you've already given Travis Strikes Again a thorough shake at the source bottle, I'd recommend getting stuck into No More Heroes 3, not just as a fan, but because a game like this comes around once in a blue moon. Sharing similar traits to Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes 3 is a surreal personal journey that touches on topics of estranged friendship, intrapersonal growth, and the many hardships associated with moving on in life. There were some points where I wanted the in-game universe fleshed out a little bit more, and the final act of the game is downright bonkers even for a Suda51 game, but if I were to draw a parallel to Travis geeking out over Takashi Miike movies, there's a method to all the madness here, and I, among many other diehard fans, will look forward to deciphering this absurdist piece for weeks, months, and years to come. For more reviews, previews, and game-related content, be sure to drop us a like on this video and subscribe to us here at youtube.com/NewGamePlusTV. Thanks heaps for watching, we appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.